Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at the last section of chapter 3. We're going to prove theorems about perpendicular lines. Now let's just cover a few things about perpendicular lines. We know that perpendicular lines, they cross to form 90-degree angles. And they'll either tell you that they're perpendicular or they'll tell you that it's 90 degrees. And many times they use this symbol, and that means that it's 90 degrees. And if one of them is 90 degrees, all the rest of these angles are also 90 degrees. Another thing that we know about perpendicular lines is the slopes are opposite reciprocals. And you go, well, what does that mean? Let's do a few examples. Let's say that I have the slope of 2/3 and I want the slope of a perpendicular line. What we're going to do is, first of all, it says opposite. What that means is 2/3 is positive in the first slope. The second slope then would be negative. So they're opposite signs. And then a reciprocal, what that means is I'm going to take that fraction and I'm going to flip it. So rather than 2/3, I'm going to get -3/2 or 3/2. Now be careful, because some students want to turn that into -1 1/2, or they want to turn it into -1.5. Don't do that, because when you are graphing, you need the rise over the run. Let's go on and let's do another example. Let's say I have m equaling -2, and I want to do perpendicular line. -2 is the same thing as -2/1. So if you want to put it over 1, feel free to do that to help you with this. And so if that's negative, my new slope is going to be positive, and it's going to be 1/2. So you just flip it and change the sign. And then finally, if I have the slope of 0, again, if it's a slope of 0, the line is a horizontal line. If I were figuring out slope using the slope formula, you would have something like 0/3. And if I used my calculator, that would give me 0. So if I'm doing a line that's perpendicular to a horizontal line, that would give me a vertical line. And the slope of this is undefined. If you are solving for slope using the slope formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, you would have something like 3/0. And on your calculator, it would say error. You need to understand that that is an undefined slope. So those are a few examples of slopes for perpendicular lines. Now let's go on and let's talk a little bit about how can we find the shortest distance between a point and a line. And here's an example. Here's a point and a line. To find the shortest distance, we're going to draw a line that is perpendicular. So that's really why we use those perpendicular lines. Let's move on and look at some application with perpendicular lines. So in this example, you're going to see that it says A is perpendicular to B. And what that means in the picture is that these are 90-degree angles, all of them. So if I know that all of those angles made by the green lines are 90 degrees, what do we know about the measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2? Well, what we know is that if I take the measure of angle 1 and I add the measure of angle 2, that's going to give me 90 degrees. So that little symbol, that little information, knowing that these are perpendicular, tells us a lot about the relationship between some of our angles. Now, if we know that those lines are perpendicular, what happens with 3 and 4? So what happens with both of these angles? Notice that they form a straight line. So the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 4, that would give me 180 degrees, because when they're next to each other, like in the picture, they form a straight line. And of course, a straight line is 180 degrees. Let's go ahead then and let's look at some algebra with perpendicular lines. Notice that in this picture, I have that little square right there, and that means that I've got perpendicular lines, okay? So because I know that, I'm going to change the color here, 3x minus 5 plus x minus 4 is going to give me 90 degrees. So I'm making this relationship that this is also 90 degrees. Because it's 90 degrees, I can add them together and set them equal to 90. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine like terms and solve this algebraically. So I've got 4x minus 9 equals 90. I'm going to add 9 to each side. So 4x equals 99. Then I'm going to divide by 4. So x equals 24.75 or 24 3/4 degrees. And notice that I'm not talking about slope. So because I'm not talking about slope in this particular example, my answer can be 24.75 or 24 3/4. If they ask you round to the nearest tenth, that'd be 24.8. So you just need to really pay attention to what am I solving and what are the directions as far as do I need to round or not. That is it for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.